Whether or not you choose to do cardio is completely up to you, but that doesn't change the fact that it's an important part of a well-rounded approach to fitness, health, and longevity. And today we're going to talk about adding cardio to your home or garage gym. Should you even do it? Do you need to do it? And where the heck are you going to put all that stuff anyway? That and more on today's episode of the GymCrafter podcast. Welcome back to the GymCrafter podcast, everybody. My name is Tim. I am the head gym nerd here at GymCrafter.com and the GymCrafter YouTube channel, the sites that I built to help ordinary folks like you and I build home and garage gyms that we absolutely love. And sometimes having a gym you absolutely love means putting something in that gym that you don't necessarily absolutely love doing. And for a lot of us, that's cardio. For folks who really love weight training, doing cardio is something that we've spent our lives making excuses on why we don't need to do it, looking for research articles on why you don't need to do it, justifying to other people that you're never going to need to outrun anybody because you're not breaking the law like you did when you were a kid. But no matter what your reasoning is, like I said in the intro, it's important to have it. So today is going to be episode 1 of 2 on adding cardio to your gym. And this is really driven by, if you watched the last podcast, it's driven by my need to really get back on the cardio and conditioning train and how I've chosen to do it. So as I've added stuff to my gym, I kind of put together a couple of episodes that will hopefully help all of you not only add cardio to your gyms, but kind of get reinvigorated to get cardio back in your routines if you've let it slip. And then also find some forms that aren't just torture, right? Like not everybody needs one of those horrible air bikes. But before we get into that, we're going to start with a garage gym equipment update because I haven't done that in a while. And I know you guys like these. Some of you like them. For those of you that don't like these types of updates, I always put timestamps down below. So feel free to skip Tim talking about stuff that's not related to the topic of the episode. That's why those markers are there. For the rest of you, let's talk about why I'm sitting in a spot that still has no rack in it. So if you've been following my saga of my missing rack, I still don't have a rack. I'm recording this episode in mid-January. It's probably not going to post until closer to February, but I probably won't have a rack until February, but I've kind of decided to take the watch pot never boils approach, and I've just kind of stopped thinking about it. It shows up when it shows up, and I'm actually kind of having a lot of fun in doing some other things in its place. And one of the things that I've realized is, number one, you can do an awful lot with some dumbbells, a bench, a landmine, and a trap bar. Man, I don't know that I'm really missing. Now I'm missing my barbell bench presses and I'm missing my rack pulls and some of the things that I really enjoy using a rack for. But overall, as far as getting effective training in, not having a rack has not impacted me nearly as much as I thought it would. And like I said, once I stopped thinking about, oh gee, I can't do this because I don't have a rack, or I can't do that, and I started looking at the alternatives, it actually hasn't been all that bad. So for those of you out there who either don't have a rack yet or you just don't have room for a rack, there are lots and lots of ways to get in great training without having a big old giant rack. That said, the rack can't get here quick enough. I really miss it. The other thing that I've been looking at, and I'm probably going to record an entire episode on this, is I just started this week, I started the knees over toes guy training, and I'm doing some stuff. As you guys might know from previous podcasts, I'm doing this thing where one of my goals, hopefully, is to increase my vertical jump, and doing that, I need to start from the ground up, and there's really no better training program out there. If you're not familiar with the knees over toes guy, I would recommend, his name's Ben Patrick. He did an interview on the RP, or the Renaissance Periodization YouTube channel. Definitely go check that out. It's one of the better interviews that they've done over there, and it'll really give you some insight into the value of this training. And I know a lot of folks, especially as we get older, it's just been invaluable. Even just a little bit I've done so far, I've noticed an immediate improvement in range of motion, an immediate improvement in strength at the end ranges of my motion, and really an almost immediate improvement in back pain, which is something that I'm always looking for. So as part of that, I have added, and if you're following over on Instagram, and you should be following that over Instagram, because I put some stuff over there that you don't see here on YouTube, and I've started using some of the Tib Bar guy's stuff. So I started using his Tib exerciser that's got little weights on it and things. That's pretty cool. Some of his, I think it's called a slant stack. I've been using that for a bunch of stuff. I've got his Nordic back extension. I've got his sled tread. So you guys are going to be seeing a lot of that over on the Instagram channel. So if you have been wondering about those tools, those are here in my gym now. I am using them. I am liking them. I'll shoot some full-length videos. I've got some unboxing videos coming your way. I probably have enough product videos already scheduled to get me close to 2026. So it's a good problem to have, but that means that some of the stuff that you guys have been asking for gets pushed off a little bit down the road. But that's kind of the update for the gear in the gym. And as far as gear in the gym goes, there's some other stuff that I bought that I can't wait to start using that directly relates to what we're talking about today, which is getting cardio in your gym. So I think we need to start this episode or start this discussion with just a quick definition of the term cardio or cardiovascular training, because I think a lot of people, when they hear cardio, they think of those gigantic seas of treadmills at their local commercial gym. I mean, you go and walk into a Planet Fitness and it's just nothing but purple treadmills, right? That's all that there are. And unfortunately, that's because a lot of people think that's how you lose weight. That's an episode for another time. You've heard me say it before, I'll say it many times again. Cardio is the single worst way to lose weight out there, but again, we'll talk about that another time. What we really do cardio for is our heart and our lungs, and there's three benefits that I see and that I train for personally and that I would train clients for when we talk about cardio conditioning. And those are what I call the 3 E's. So efficiency, endurance, and emergencies. Is your body efficient? Can it make efficient use of the oxygen that you have, or do you gas out early? Do you have endurance? Could you run a couple of miles if you needed to? You know, if the S hits the F, would you be able to actually take off and run for a couple of miles because either there was an emergency or you had to get someplace or you had to get away from something, or just because that's kind of the mark of being a reasonably fit individual? You know, if you go to your local high school and you look at their track, that's just 8 times around the track. If you can't run 8 laps around that track without completely dying, that's a signal that you probably need to work on your cardiovascular conditioning. And then that third one is emergencies. Do you have the ability to do something in an emergency? So a great example is, and maybe this isn't quote unquote an emergency, but here in Illinois, it's been super cold. Thankfully, it hasn't snowed, but every once in a while we get these big, heavy, wet snows. And every year when that happens, there's always a bunch of people that have heart attacks and die when they're shoveling their driveway because they're asking for a lot of energy at once to get that driveway cleared, right? So to me, that's to your body, that's an emergency request for energy and oxygen and blood flow. So those are the reasons for me why I train cardio. It's for functionality. It's for being able to live as a capable human in this world. And that's why we want to make sure we integrate it into our training, because sure, you might be able to bench press 315, but you're probably never going to need to bench press your way out of an emergency. But you might need to run or dig or climb your way out of an emergency. And all of those things require cardiovascular conditioning. So that's what, when we're talking about cardio and we're putting cardio in your gym, that's why. We're not doing it because you need to be a runner. We're not doing it because you're training for a marathon. And we're not doing it because you need to lose weight. We're doing it for your heart and your lungs. And just like there's 3 benefits, there are 3 basic types of cardio that we are going to be training. And that's why I said I'm probably not going to use the word cardio too much. I'm going to change to using these 3 words. The first one is zone 2 conditioning. And what zone 2 conditioning is it's just steady state cardio, but not like running, right? The way that you know zone 2, now there's some crazy, stupid scientific ways to test if you're in zone 2 or not, but let me give you just what's important. We'll get you the 20% that'll get you the 80% of results. Zone 2 is when you're doing something at enough of a rate to where you could have a conversation while you're doing it, but you kind of don't want to, right? Like if you're just walking along, strolling with your spouse or your kids and you can have a conversation, no problem, that's not zone 2. When you pick it up and maybe you go on a hike instead where you've got some elevation and maybe not necessarily all flat ground, and you start, like you could talk, but you're like, everybody all of a sudden kind of gets a little bit quiet. You're not out of breath. You're not huffing and puffing. You're not sprinting. That's zone 2. That's kind of the area where zone 2 is. And study after study after study after study shows that there's this magic area between 2 and 3 hours of zone 2 activity every week, like reduces all-cause mortality, reduces cardiovascular disease, reduces all kinds of bad stuff by a significant amount. One of the single best things you can do to make sure that you live longer and that you live well into your later years is adding zone 2 conditioning into your training. So that's one type of cardio we're going to talk about. The second two are what are called energy systems training. So without getting too geeky on you, your body produces energy in a multiple of different ways. There are about 3 different energy systems. I know there's more than that, but there's 3 basic ones, and they're responsible for time periods. There's an energy system that's responsible for short bursts. There's an energy system that's responsible for a little bit longer than that. And then there's an energy system that's responsible for long, steady state type stuff. And training those different energy systems, you can actually train them to get better. And to put it simply, there's aerobic conditioning and there's anaerobic conditioning. Aerobic conditioning simply means with oxygen. That means you're doing it at a little bit slower pace to where you have time to replenish the oxygen by breathing. And then there's anaerobic conditioning where you're pushing yourself so hard, you have to rely on other fuel sources and other things besides what oxygen intake is getting you. And you can train both of those systems. We're going to talk about how to train both of those systems today. And once we know those 3 things that we need to train, the zone 2, the anaerobic, and the aerobic systems, what happens is now we can go, okay, I know I need to train those things. Now, what are the tools that I'm going to put in my gym or in my life to train those systems? And I want to stop and just give you a caveat right here because I know there's people already typing this comment. You can do all of this without putting a single thing in your gym and without spending a single dollar. You can go outside and walk, hike, and run and train all 3 of those systems. You don't need to buy anything. You don't need to do anything. Now, right now it's literally 6 degrees outside my garage. I am not going outside. Now, there are people in my neighborhood who run every single day. There's people in my neighborhood who bike every single day. I see them out there at the same time every day. They're dressed appropriately, but they're out there every single day. So those folks, they don't need things in their house, right? They have the discipline to go out and do it. They're out there in the rain, they're out there in the snow, they're out there no matter what. So if you're that person, then you don't need to add something in your gym. If you're the other 98% of people in this world who aren't going to go outside when it's 6 degrees, most of us, and I'll be the first to admit this, there was a time where I'm like, I just like to walk, I like to hike, I have a bike that I like riding outside. But then when it was inclement weather, I would just go, we'll just skip it today. And as we all know, I'll just skip it today turns into, well, I'll just skip it tomorrow, turns into, well, I'll get to it on Monday, turns into, well, you know, and next week it's the 1st of the month, I'll start. And before you know it, you've gone a really long time without doing the cardio and the training that you should. And that's where I am right now. As winter came, I stopped doing cardio. I had 2 rowers upstairs in my office. I stopped using those a couple of months ago, and I have absolutely paid the price. So that's why I'm kind of on this cardio kick and talk about really how am I going to get cardio back in my house. And I think an indoor cardio option is one of the 3 basic components of any gym. So I did one of the early episodes of this podcast. I talked about the 3 things you need to build a home gym, and that is space to train, some type of resistance to train with, and an indoor cardio option. Or 4, you know, whatever you decide to do. But you need those 3 things. I really think you need those 3 things to have a complete home gym. So today we're going to talk about some of the guidelines, like I said, to what those indoor cardio options should be. And like I said, I know you can go outside and do it for free, but let's talk about how to get some indoor options so that you don't have to go out and run in the rain. And let's start with that zone 2, because that's probably the easiest. It's also probably the cardio you're going to be doing the most. Now, one thing that you don't want to do, and I know some of you, I know sometimes they're called cardio bunnies, sometimes they're called cardio junkies. I know some of you guys really like your cardio, so I'm not going to try and talk you out of doing that. If I was training you, I would. Just because I don't think it's good for you. It really wears you out over a long period of time. But that said, the zone 2 conditioning does require a fairly regular amount of work. Now again, not killing yourself, not ending up in puddles of sweat, no sweat angels when you're done, but zone 2 does require a pretty fairly regular amount of work. So to get the recommended amount of zone 2, and if you really want to get geeky about this, Dr. Peter Attia has a podcast called The Drive. He talks about zone 2 a lot. You can definitely look it up over there. He will get as geeky and dorky and in-depth as you want. He will also give you all of the actual studies and actual mortality risks that you reduce by doing this. So don't just take my word for it. Go check out Dr. Attia's podcast. But the crux of what he says is you're going to need to do somewhere between 2 and 4 hours a week of zone 2 cardio, preferably broken up into 30 to 45 minute blocks. So for me, what that looks like is, luckily I have 2 cattle dogs. And if you're familiar with dogs at all, cattle dogs are high energy dogs. They need to go out and run pretty much every day. Now, we didn't go today because even my dogs who love to be outside in the cold went outside and both turned around and went right back to the door. So I'm like, okay, we don't need to go to the dog park today. But for me, what that looks like is we go to the dog park every morning, and then our dog park's awesome. It's got woods, it's got hills, it's got logs to jump over. It's really great. It's 2 miles around the outside. So for me, if I walk at a really brisk pace, all the way around the outside, I get into zone 2, no problem. That takes me about 45 minutes. As long as I go to the dog park 4 days a week or more, I'm getting my zone 2 in. Now, like it is now when it's cold, I need an indoor option because there's going to be a couple of days where we just don't go. It's scheduled to warm up a little bit, but then after that, it's scheduled to dip into the low single digits. And there's times here in the winter where we won't go to the dog park for sometimes 4, 5, 6 days in a row. So I'm not going to skip the zone 2 because of that. So I need an indoor option for that. But that's one option for you, is if you want to just head outside, walk briskly, but that's what you're looking for. You're looking for at least 4 times a week, 4 to 6 times a week. You can do it every day if you are one of those cardio junkies. But again, you're not running as fast as you can. You're not trying to push yourself. You're not trying to set a marathon pace. You're just trying to get your heart rate up. Because if you raise your heart rate further than that, you actually lose the benefits of zone 2. And that's one of the things that, especially here in the US, that we like to do is more is better, right? Got to be bigger and more and faster. It must be better. And that's actually not true. You want to get into that zone 2 area and stay there, not dip below and not go above. So 4 to 6 times a week, a half hour to 45 minutes a day, get yourself into zone 2, and that'll help you out. And that's really what we want for zone 2. So what could we use for that? We could use any type of cardio we want for that, right? We could use a treadmill, we could use an elliptical, you could go swimming, you could take a hike. You really have a lot of options. So what I typically recommend for your zone 2 is find something that you're going to enjoy doing for that length of time. One of the reasons why I stopped using my rowers is that while I enjoyed them for 15-minute conditioning hits or hit training or Tabatas, after a while, I got really, really bored of using those things for 30 to 45 minutes. I can walk for days, no problem. I'll put on a Netflix movie or an audio book and just walk. I'll do work. I can set up my laptop on the treadmill and I can work while I walk. Like for me, walking is the thing for me that I prefer doing. So I brought a treadmill back into my garage. But you can really do anything to get your zone 2 in. But just make sure that it's something that you're gonna like using over a long period of time. Next, let's talk about aerobic conditioning. So what aerobic conditioning, like I said, is it's training while your muscles have oxygen to refuel themselves and while your blood can carry glycogen to your muscle belly so that you can actually refuel. Again, I don't want to get into the Krebs cycle and all kinds of dorky stuff like that, but let's just say you have to train, and basically what you're training for is longer endurance. So the way that I like to train and the way that I program for myself and for others to train aerobic conditioning is it's typically about a half hour to a 40-minute block. You don't have to do it a lot, and it's typically once a week, maybe twice a week. So that's it. That's all you need to do. In order to really get benefit from training your aerobic energy system, 1 to 2 times a week is all you need to do it for about a half hour to 40 minutes, and that's it. My favorite way to do it are longer intervals. So you can get on a bike, you can get on a rower, you can get on a treadmill, and what you're gonna do is you're gonna do 60 seconds at a reasonable pace. So let's say that one of the things I used to really love to do is I would go out to my local track when I lived closer to a school that had one, and I would just start running, just start jogging, nothing crazy, but faster than zone 2. And I would do that for 60 seconds, and then I would walk for 60 seconds. And then I would do that for 60 seconds, and then I would walk for 60 seconds. And I would do that a cycle of 15 times. It's 30 minutes of work, and you got 15 cycles of 60 seconds on, 60 seconds off. That's gonna really train your aerobic system. And then what you do is you finish that with a 15-minute, just a cool down. So what I would recommend is incline walking on a treadmill. So something a little bit harder than walking just on flat ground. Maybe you want to get to that zone 2 level. You can just kind of go for a relaxed row. You can do a relaxed kind of time on the elliptical. Again, you're going to want to push yourself a little bit. It's not quite just moseying along, but it's enough to just continue to make you have to use that oxygen and kind of a cool down after that. So that's about a 45-minute workout. Again, When I program that for people and myself, once a week is all you need. So typically the way my programming looks like when I integrate that into training, I get my zone 2 done in the morning, and then my training looks like I'm typically in the gym 6 days a week, and I'll do 4 days of weight training and then 2 days of conditioning. So I do an upper, lower, aerobic, upper, lower, anaerobic. And then I have an off day on Sunday, which I typically do, foam rolling and mobility and stuff like that. But that's typically how my training's laid out. That's how I lay out training for other people. I think it's a really smart way to program, and it allows you, for those of you who like to be in the gym every day, it allows you to be in the gym every day. But it gives you something to do on those days where your muscles are recovering and you really shouldn't be lifting if you're lifting appropriately on those other 2 days. So let's talk about that. And so actually, let's talk about the equipment that you'll need for the aerobic conditioning. Again, you can do it outside. You can use the same gear that you used for your zone 2. And what you'll see here is that you don't necessarily need to buy specialized gear. Now, in the next episode in this series, I'm going to talk about some specific gear for specific applications, not only because I have bought some specific gear for my gym, but I know a lot of people like to mix it up. Like if you use a treadmill for everything, if you use a treadmill for your zone 2, and this is, again, why I stopped using my rowers. I was using a rower for my zone 2, I was using a rower for my aerobic, I was using a rower for my anaerobic, and quite honestly, if I never get on a rower again, it might be too soon. And I really enjoyed it too. It was weird. Just one day I woke up and I'm like, I'm done rowing. I don't know what that was, but I ran that thing into the ground, let me tell you. But nothing against rowing, great exercise. It's awesome. Don't not row because of me, but I'm kind of moving on from that. You can use the same gear for all three, or you can use some specialized gear. If you want to listen to some specific, very specific gear recommendations, tune into the next episode. Make sure you subscribe, all that kind of good stuff. But let's talk about anaerobic conditioning because it's a little bit different than the aerobic conditioning. What anaerobic conditioning is it's still intervals. At least my favorite way to do it is still intervals. So think of it more like much shorter bursts. So either Tabata training, HIIT training, and you're going to do much shorter intervals, and you're going to do them typically with some type of resistance. So for example, if your aerobic conditioning was out running on flat ground on the track, on that local high school track, your anaerobic conditioning is going to be hill sprints, right? Think about 60 seconds around while you're running, 60 seconds around while you're walking. Well, your anaerobic training is running up the hill as fast as you can up, maybe I typically like to work up to about 75 to 100 yards up a hill, and that takes a while to work up to that, and then walk back down and then go up again. And again, same like 10 rounds, 15 rounds of that. And you can do that on lots of different stuff. You can row as hard as you can for 15 seconds and then take 45 seconds off, and then row as hard as you can for 15 seconds and then take 15 seconds or 45 seconds off. But the idea is much shorter intervals that are weighted. I also like to do kettlebell circuits with this because you want to use some type of resistance. That's why I like a rowing machine, because the harder and faster you pull, the more resistance there is. The hill sprints adds the resistance of going uphill. Kettlebell circuits adds weights. You can do weight training circuits. Just you want something that's going to tax your muscles. And the idea is that you want to work so hard that you're instantly sapping all of the energy that you currently have that's stored up. So you have typically a store of energy that'll last you for these short bursts. Once you do a couple of them, your body shifts into its next energy system, and that's what you're training is. You're training that ability to do things while you're kind of just, you don't necessarily have the endurance to do them. And this is how people can do sprints for, I ran track for a while, and lots of people like the short distances, lots of people like the long distances. The middle distance runners, you guys out there who are middle distance runners, you're a special breed of weirdo, because it's horrible, because you use up your sprinting energy and you're not really tapping into that long distance energy because you're still pushing yourself, but you're pushing yourself past a point where your body has the energy. It's a very miserable experience. So now that you kind of have an idea of why you're adding cardio training into your gym, you understand that cardio is not for weight loss, but it's for training those three different energy systems, zone 2, anaerobic, anaerobic. You've got a general idea of what gear you might already have or ways you can go outside and do it. Next episode, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about some specific gear, like I said, of what you can use for each of those things that allow you to mix it up. I like having several options available so that maybe what I did to my rowing, I really loved rowing for a while. And I just, like I said, I don't want to even look at them anymore. anymore. And I think one of the reasons why I did it is I just did it too much without mixing things up. So I think that if you have a few different options, so we'll talk about that the next episode as well. And we will answer the single most asked question I get on cardio gear, hands down, bar none. I get asked this one question more than all other cardio questions combined. And I'm gonna give you an actual answer next episode. And that question is, which kind of cardio burns the most calories? And that, my friends, is all I have for this episode of the GymCrafter podcast. Thank you for watching this long. If you're here still now and you haven't hit that like button and you're not subscribed, go ahead and take care of both of those things for me down below. Those help the podcast out. Those help you guys out, because the more people that like and subscribe, the more companies take notice of GymCrafter and the more stuff I get to show you. And I'm up to 3 videos a week right now, soon to be more than that. I'm doing the podcast every Monday. I'm doing longer reviews on Wednesday, shorter reviews on Friday, and we're going to be doing some training program reviews coming up, and we're actually going to be doing a follow along with my old guy training, so that those of you who are in similar situations can kind of follow along and do some training in your garage gym as well. So all that stuff is coming up, and all that stuff is made possible because you guys like and subscribe. And when there's affiliate links below, you click those affiliate links. So I know it's annoying to hear me ask all the time, but it helps you, it helps me. So let's do that. And until the next episode, I'm Tim with GymCrafter.